With Pokemon cards having close to a 30-year history, it is common to see fun, often whimsical cards, of course. But if you was to deep dive the lore, suddenly some cards have a much darker side to them. So today I bring you the creepy and often disturbing Pokemon card iceberg. The further down we go, the more creepy it gets. Crobat Skyridge. So right off the bat, you don't need me to tell you why this card is straight up creepy. I mean, come on, just look at it. And the Horth agrees with me too. Could you imagine walking around late at night, looking up at a tree, and you are greeted by this horde of 5'11" bats, lots of them just hanging upside down, staring at you with those beady eyes? I tell you what, I'd be shook. This creepy theme carries out into the Pokemon Power too, since Carry Off lets you once per turn flip a coin. If you flip heads, you can look at your opponent's hand and shuffle away a Pokemon you find there. This, in my opinion, makes me think that these Crobats look even more menacing, since they are just watching you, waiting for a chance to whisk you away. I would run a mile. Grimer. So this Grimer's just flat out, well, weird to be fair. Like, Grimer, what are you looking at, mate? It's just not on that, is it? Now, this was obviously changed in the Western release, so Grimer's looking somewhere else. And from what I gather in Japanese culture, this is like a bit of an inside joke. But come on, Grimer, can't be doing that. Drampa. So this Drampa artwork is downright hilarious. But by the time you add some context, it actually starts to get a little bit dark. So let's look at it without said context here. So here we can see two kids and a Drampa flying off to the left. The kids look like they're having fun, right? I mean, who wouldn't have fun flying on top of a Drampa? It's a nice whimsical situation, right? Well, if we were to consult the Pokédex, that context might change our view, because the Ultra Sun Pokédex says, if a child Drampa has made friends with is bullied, Drampa will find the bully's house and burn it to the ground. Okay, Drampa, I see you. Drampa is the bringer of justice, apparently. This is actually insane when you think about it. So there is a decent chance that the kids on this Drampa's back are Drampa's friends, and they have just come back to tell Granddaddy Drampa that they have been bullied. And Drampa got so mad that he's going to take matters into his own hands and go and destroy the bully's house in revenge, but also take the kids with him so they can watch it all unfold. Drampa is an absolute mad geezer. Arrokuda. So this is a pretty simple one, but if we was looking to the background of this Arrokuda card, we can see a cheeky Cramorant diving looking for some food. Cramorant and Arrokuda have a strange relationship in Pokemon, with Cramorant being able to use Arrokuda as like a weapon of sorts when it gets hit, and with Arrokuda constantly being stuck in Cramorant's beak for ages. Now, it makes me wonder that if the Lost Box Cramorant is actually using an Arrokuda for the Spit Instantly attack, because if you didn't know, Cramorant can attack for 0 energy if you have 4 cards in your Lost Zone. So, is he just spitting out an Arrokuda he found, and that's why he doesn't need energy? I'm not sure. But lo and behold, if we were to look at this Cramorant card, we can see that it was successful in its mission, and it now has that same Arrokuda in its beak. Poor Arrokuda. Tinkaton. So, Tinkaton is this funny pink little Pokemon with a huge hammer that it uses to decimate its opponents with immense power. This reflected in its EX card with its aptly named Big Hammer attack that adds up very fast, doing 30 damage for each card in your hand. And bear in mind, there are other Tinkaton cards that discard 1 card from your hand so you can draw 3 more. This means your hand fills up very fast. However, have you ever considered how Tinkaton actually makes its hammer? Well, according to the Tinkertuff Pokédex entry, Tinkertuff will purposely get into fights with Pawniard and Bisharp, and it will take the metal from those Pokemon to add to its hammer. So, when you think about it, Tinkertuff is looking around remnants of other Pokemon that it has beaten up, and in turn uses those remnants to beat up other Pokemon too. That on its own is a bit strange. But when Tinkertuff evolves into a Tinkerton, it steps it up by using the hammer to launch rocks at Corviknight and then gives them a big old whack to collect more metal. This is pretty wild on its own, but if we just look at this artwork, Tinkerton is clearly giving something a huge hit. And going off some Pokédex entries, there's a very good chance that Tinkerton is using a hammer that is made up from Corviknight bits, and then using those Corviknight bits to beat up other Corviknight to get more metal. This is actually insane. Like, could you imagine someone running up to you and giving you a whack with like a human arm or something? Very odd. Lost City. Lost City has seen a ton of competitive play. If a Pokemon is KO'd while Lost City is in play, instead of it being sent to the discard pile like normal, they're sent to the Lost Zone. The Lost Zone is a place in the Pokemon TCG where once cards go there, they can never come back, since there are no cards to recover resources from the Lost Zone. Okay, that's cool. And Lost City saw competitive play because you can forcibly remove your opponent's attackers or tech cards permanently so they can't reuse them over and over again. Pretty good. But let's just think about the logistics of this for a second. What is this city? How do people live here? Are people just getting yeeted to the Lost Zone by accident? I mean, looking at the artwork, are these cracks gateways to the Lost Zone? Because if so, that's mighty dangerous. People have to have fallen into here before. And if they have, would you just never see them again? That's terrifying. So this is one Pokemon city that you would never, ever want to visit. That's for sure. Dragapult. Dragapult is a cool Pokemon. Awesome design. Reminds me of a B2 stealth bomber with that angled head. And Dragapult has had a ton of playable cards realistically. Dragapult VMAX was a tier 1 deck that would deal 130 damage to the active and spread 5 damage counters to your opponent's bench Pokemon. And with cards like Horror Energy, this would 2-shot the active while decimating your opponent's bench. Very nice. More recently, Dragapult EX is making waves with its Phantom Dive attack, which is basically a beefed up Max Phantom, dealing 200 damage to the active and spread 6 damage counters to the bench. So we can see a trend with Dragapult cards, that the good ones tend to 2-shot the active while peppering the bench. However, there is a Dragapult card that attempts to slap the bench for much higher damage output, and it's this one from Silver Tempest. Its Dragon Launcher attack lets you discard as many amount of GP from your bench, and you do 100 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each one you discarded. This didn't really amount to much, since having to discard the GP that you need to evolve from doesn't really make a lot of sense. And it currently doesn't even see much play in the Dragapult EX decks. However, if you were to deep dive what's actually happening here, it starts to get a bit dark. Dragapult is rounding up kids and launching them full speed at the enemy. This is wild. And we don't have to speculate here about this. The Pokédex backs me up, saying stuff like when it isn't battling, it's keeping Dreepy in the holes on its horns. Once a fight starts, it launches Dreepy like supersonic missiles. Fully crazy when you actually think about it. But apparently, according to the Pokemon Shield Pokédex entry, the Dreepy actually enjoy this process, so I guess there's that after all. I mean, it does look like they're having fun. Cubone. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail here, because we have another more heinous Cubone much later on in the iceberg. But we all know the backstory of Cubone. So if this Cubone card doesn't hit you right in the feels, then I don't know what will. Block 3, Silent Lab. This might be the most playable card that we're looking at here today. Silent Lab is a stadium card that turns off all basic Pokemon's ability while it's in play. This would slam a ton of the format like Hooper EX, who will grab you 3 basic Pokemon when you put it into play via its ability Scoundrel Ring, which was very strong at the time. But the main card this would stop was Shaymin EX, which was one of the best cards ever printed, which would let you draw to have 6 cards in your hand when you put it into play. Every deck ran like 3 or 4 Shaymin EX, and Silent Lab would stop them all. So that makes Silent Lab very strong. However, I'm not terribly interested in the gameplay here though. Instead, I'm actually interested in what exactly is going on here. This looks like an extremely soundproof room, which, if you don't know, can be devastating, since in these kind of rooms you can hear your own heartbeat. Massive YouTuber Ryan Trahan couldn't even last that long in such a room. So I just have visions of Shaymin being thrown in here so its ability can't be activated, or any other basic Pokemon. And while that makes me chuckle a bit, when you actually sit down and think about it, it's kind of a bit mean. Absol. While this card is absolutely majestic, make no mistake about it, and its Swirling Disaster attack is actually pretty good, dealing 10 to all your opponent's Pokemon. However, that name Swirling Disaster is actually pretty suitable here too, since if we were to look at Absol's Sapphire Pokédex entry, it states that if Absol ever appears amongst humans, then a disaster is about to happen. So with that in mind, what disaster do we think is going to happen here? And when you actually think about it, when you see Absol in the Hoenn region, it's on Mount Pyre, which is just before the main evil plot is about to kick off. So if you're looking at this Absol card, something bad might be about to happen. Gyarados. This guy here, featured in this Ancient Origins Gyarados, is definitely having a mare. Fun fact, this is actually my favourite Pokemon card artwork of all time. The perspective on the Gyarados really displays its power and size, especially in comparison to this lowly fisherman. And if we were to consult Gyarados' Soul Silver entry, we know that this fisherman is about to have to run or row pretty fast. Because it says once Gyarados appears, it goes on a rampage. It remains enraged until it demolishes everything around it. And unfortunately for this fisherman, he is definitely around it. So he is going to have to hop, skip and jump out of there fast, otherwise he could be in trouble. Or maybe he could throw a netball and, cross his fingers. Electrode from Skyridge. Now, as far as we're aware, Electrode absolutely loves to explode. Literally every Pokédex entry says something to this effect. And this is mirrored in the Pokemon TCG, with a ton of different Electrode cards having a bonus for Electrode for, self-destructing. Normally, this allows you to accelerate a silly amount of energy, like Electrode GX for example. However, with that all being said, there is one Electrode card that just doesn't sit right with me, and it's this Skyridge card. Something about this artwork just makes me think Electrode actually isn't best pleased about the situation. And if we was to look at this Pokédex entry, Electrode actually hasn't got a choice in the matter, because it says when it's thunderstorming out, Electrode will explode. And it's definitely thunderstorming in this artwork. And I think clearly this Electrode isn't excited about that. To be honest, he looks very worried about the premise of exploding. This single card has completely reworked my thoughts about Electrode. I'm not sure if it actually does enjoy exploding. And if it doesn't, he could actually be very, very scared, because if he doesn't want to explode and he always explodes in thunderstorms, is he trying his best to dodge the lightning bolts? Goodness, I guess we'll never really know. Block 4. Jellicent is a funny little Pokemon, alright? It reminds me of Barney the dinosaur. And Barney the dinosaur is no threat to anyone. Well, Jellicent does have ghost typing, so we know there might be some room for some shenanigans. And well, there are definitely some shenanigans going on here. Even though Jellicent looks innocent, there is a very scary side to it, which took me by surprise. Let's look at this card from Next Destinies. Looks fine, right? There are two Jellicent just going about their evening with a cruise ship in the background. What's wrong with that? Well, if we were to look at the Alpha Sapphire Pokédex entry, we can see that something very bad is about to happen. The fate of ships and crew that wander into Jellicent's habitat. All sunken, all lost, all vanished. Okay, so this cruise ship might be in a spot of bother, because it definitely doesn't seem like it's too far away from those Jellicent, probably making this area Jellicent's habitat. And to be honest, it looks like the pink one is well on its way to go sort them out. Man, I really hope the people on that ship have some electric types to help them out. And while this card is kind of creepy, those people are on a huge ship, and to be fair, they're quite far away, so there is a chance that they will get away. The same can't be said for this guy right here, who features in the Battle Styles Jellicent card. And if we were to look at the description of this card, we know that this fella is clearly in trouble. Jellicent wait at night for their prey to arrive, and clearly it's night time. So if we were to refer back to that Alpha Sapphire Pokédex entry, remember that all ships and crew that enter Jellicent's territory never return. And this isn't like that Next Destiny card where the ship is very far away. This person is in trouble. What we're witnessing here is a poor fisherman who lost his way and stumbled into some Jellicent. And well, the Pokédex says the rest. Cacturn. Now I'm sorry, but who would have thought this little uncommon card from Scarlet Violet base set might actually be the most terrifying on this list? Let me explain. If you were to look at the Alpha Sapphire Pokédex entry, if a traveller is going through the desert in the thick of night, Cacturn will follow in a ragtag group. The Pokemon are biding their time, waiting for the traveller to tire and become incapable of moving. Oh my goodness. So Cacturn is a bit of a menace then. Not only hunting at night, but stalking travellers who are struggling in the desert. So let me paint you this picture. You've wandered into the desert, maybe looking for some fossils to turn into cool Pokemon. More on them later. However, you lose your way. You forgot to pack extra bottles of water, so the heat leaves you a bit foggy, but you plow on. Eventually, you decide you can't continue anymore, and you want to turn back, but your sense of direction is disorientated. However, you try your best, but you're starting to get weak. It's getting dark, and you're just unsure of what to do. Eventually, you collapse in confusion and exhaustion. And what is there to greet you at your lowliest moment? Not a Pokemon or human trying to help you, but instead a Cacturn who has been stalking you for the past hours and the last thing you see before passing out is this Cacturn lining you up. This card, I think, is the perfect point of view here, because with the Cacturn being at a slight elevation, it makes me certain that this situation I've just described is what's happening. Oh, and that scares me to no end. Mega Gengar. Now, Mega Gengar didn't really do much in the Pokemon TCG. It mostly got outshone by the basic Gengar EX in most circumstances. However, there was a very cool shiny Mega Gengar card. However, the Pokédex entry shows Mega Gengar in a completely different light. It states, it tries to take the lives of anyone and everyone. It will even try and curse the trainer who is its master. So wait, hold on a second. Nobody is safe around Mega Gengar. Absolute madness. However, what does make me laugh is the Let's Go Pokédex entry, where it states, it can pass through other dimensions and appear anywhere. It caused a stir one time where it stuck its leg out of the wall. Like, what are you on about? Are you telling me the same Pokemon that wants to take the lives of everything around it also, sometimes for the bants, just sticks its leg out of a wall? What's going on? And it isn't even just Mega Gengar who gets up to mischief, since this Gengar card just seems awful when you consider the Pokemon Pearl Pokédex entry, which states, lurking in the shadowy corners of rooms, it waits for its chances to steal its prey's life force. Look at Gengar's tongue in this card. It is waiting to slurp up life force. Just makes me feel uneasy. And look at this one, where he looks happy to be jogging up to you to steal your life force. That's what makes Gengar scary, is that not only does he do these heinous things, but he seems to enjoy it as well. Palossand. The idea of a ghost sandcastle, while being whimsical, is a bit strange. Like, who built this? How did it get possessed by a ghost? And the idea of ghostly quicksand, well, it sends a chill down my spine. And funnily enough, it's not too far from the truth, because if we was to look at the Pokemon Sword Pokédex entry, Palossand is known as the Beach Nightmare. It pulls prey down into the sand by controlling the sand itself, and then it sucks out their souls. I'm sorry, what? The Beach Nightmare? And it controls the sand to pull you down and it sucks out your soul? And going by this point of view, this could be what's happening to us right now. Are we falling victim to Palossand ourselves? I really hope not. Computer error. I actually had no clue this card existed until I started researching for this video. It was an old school Wizard of the Coast promo card that was originally a Koro Japanese magazine promo. The card itself isn't terribly good, but when I looked at the artwork and then looked back at the name, something odd jumped out at me. So in the artwork, we can clearly see this group of Pokemon getting straight up the PC and looking like they're in a hurry to get out too. Unsure what the Pokemon Center staff or even whose trainer whose Pokemon this is thinks about this, but that's not the point. The idea is that a computer error could indeed release Pokemon straight from the PC. This is very scary. Like, imagine a Gyarados who's been cooped up in the box for years, gets released in the middle of the Celadon Pokemon Center, and we know by the Pokedex entry that Gyarados would not be very happy in this scenario. It could get very gnarly very fast. But where it really gets terrifying though, is what happens if the evil teams worked out how to replicate this computer error at will. For example, so let's say you're in Hoenn. You are the hero. You've captured Kyogre to save the world from certain flooding, foiling Team Aqua's plans forever. But they're clever, and they just lay low for a bit. And then they work out how to release Kyogre straight from your box without you knowing. And then they just carry on with their plan like nothing's wrong. Or even better, they catch the Kyogre. Like, what happens in that scenario? Or what if Getsis, who wanted to release all Pokemon, cottoned onto this? He could literally just free so many Pokemon without anyone having a clue on what's happened or how to stop it. I'm glad this was just an old promo card and not a situation that ever got panned out in game, because it could get dicey real quick. Block 5. Hypno is already one of the creepiest Pokemon of all time, with Pokedex entries like, it carries a pendulum-like device. There was once an incident where it took away a child that it hypnotized. It's not hard to see why Hypno has a bit of a bad reputation. However, for all the stories about Hypno, we really haven't seen it in action, carrying out its dastardly deeds, leaving most of these terrifying stories to be mostly hearsay or just Pokedex entry rumors. However, this Hypno card actually shows us Hypno in action, and it looks terrifying. I'm not sure exactly what's going on here, but it clearly shows this man either asleep or not under his own control, while Hypno is having a feast on this purple gooey stuff. Now, if I had to speculate, I think what we're seeing here is the move Dream Eater in action. and it looks horrible. But I think the worst bit about it is, look at Hypno's face. It's clearly enjoying the situation with this smug look. Now, I'm not 100% sure about what the consequences are of having a dream date, but I do not want to find out. So if you want to keep all your dreams intact, all you have to do is apparently move to Alola, because according to Hypno's Ultra Sun Pokedex entry, Hypno almost exclusively preys on the local Kamala population, meaning the humans there are safe from Hypnos and hits. Shout outs to Kamala for taking one from the team. Cubone. We all know that Cubone has had a tough time in the Pokemon universe. In Gen 1 there was a whole plotline concerning a Cubone and its passed away mother Marowak. And it's getting very dark when you actually consider what's going on concerning Cubone, because I mean, look at some of these Pokedex entries. The skull it wears on its head is that of its dead mother. According to some, it will evolve when it comes to terms with the pain of her death. Like, that's just dreadful. I'm not sure what's worse, the fact that Cubone has to wear its mum's skull, or that apparently it can only evolve when it finally deals with its mother's passing. So with that all in mind, I want us to take a look at this exhibition Cubone. Like, look past the nice sunset, and instead let's look at what's actually going on. We see a Cubone throwing around some bones, either looking excited, or happy, or very sad. Going by the attack name Teary Eyes, it could be assumed that this is a very, well, sad situation, but we can't confirm. Let's run through both scenarios. If the Cubone is happy and excited, that means that Cubone is taking joy out of throwing some bones around. I mean, I really hope not, because, you know, that's pretty strange. But let's look at the other scenario, where Cubone is sad. What we could be witnessing here is a time where Cubone has just found its recently deceased mother, and it's just took the skull for itself, and maybe it's slamming the other bones out of anger / sadness. That is very sad. But somehow it is about to get even worse for this Cubone, if you could believe it. Since if we were to look at Cubone's Pokedex entry from some, if Cubone makes too much noise in mourning its mother, Mandibuzz can often hear it and attack the Cubone as well. Poor Cubone, honestly cannot catch a break. Man, I feel bad for this little guy. Dusknoir. We all know that Dusknoir is an imposing Pokemon. I mean, simply look at it. And its new illustration card doesn't do it any favours in the cuteness department. And this Dusknoir card is about to set the metagame on fire by piling a ton of extra damage into play via its ability. The tag team card that Dusknoir had was also an absolute heater, with the Night Watch attack being the last thing your hand would ever hear, since it would shuffle 2 cards away from your opponent's hand at random. This, used in combination with Marnie, would evaporate your hand at a silly rate, while also 2-shotting whatever you had in the active. Nasty stuff. It could be argued though that this Dusknoir was even more terrifying for the metagame, since this was actually Dusknoir's first ever card, and he made a shocking debut. With its Dark Palm Poke Power, you could whisk away any one of your opponent's bench Pokemon back into their deck if they had 4 or more in play. This was actually insane, forcing your opponent to always only have 3 Pokemon in play, not anymore. And thematically, it might actually tie into the scary lore of Dusknoir, since I went digging in the Pokedex like I always do, and I was stunned about what I saw. This comes courtesy of its Pokemon Shield Pokedex entry. With the mouth on its belly, Dusknoir swallows its target whole. The soul is the only thing eaten. Dusknoir disgorges the body before departing. Hold on. What? Dusknoir absorbs prey into his belly, eats the soul, and then spits out the body? Now what is that about? Some Pokédex entries allude to the fact that Dusknoir only does this, but then some, like the Pokemon Legends Arceus one, says that sometimes Dusknoir gets it wrong. So nobody is clearly safe. Spoink. I hear you screaming for your PC. How on earth can Spoink be creepy or disturbing? Look how cute it is. And yes, you are right. Spoink is cute, whimsical, I grant you. However, what have I told you that this Spoink right here is in massive trouble, and it's not in trouble for the reason you think it is. So as we can see, Spoink here is having the time of its life, bouncing around the clouds. What could possibly go wrong? Well viewers, if we also take a look at Spoink's Pokemon Ruby Pokedex entry, it will all become clear. Spoink actually uses the impact of its bouncing to pump its heart. This, as you can imagine, could be a massive nuisance, and it raises questions like, how does Spoink sleep? Does it bounce and sleep at the same time? Well, maybe. But it's the rest of the Pokédex entry that I'm actually worried about. This Pokemon cannot afford to stop bouncing. Damn, that's pretty ominous. And this is why I'm worried about this Spoink here, because clearly it's bounced so high. I'm worried that it might take a very long time to get back down to Earth, and by extension, it will now take a long time for it to get its heart beating again. So I worry about this Spoink. Will it be able to survive? I really hope so, otherwise Spoink could be in trouble. Plot 6. This one blew my mind when I first heard about it, and was actually the inspiration for this video. So here we are, looking at the secret mission card from Gym Heroes. As we can see, Lieutenant Surge and his Raichu are scouting something out with 2 pairs of binoculars. What are they scouting out? Well, I'm not sure. But considering Lieutenant Surge was/is a soldier, and he does say that his Pokemon did help him out in the war, and the name of the card, it's not terribly crazy to think that he might be on some sort of mission of sorts. That's not all though, because we might be able to dive a little bit deeper. Because if we were to look at the map in the background, we can work out exactly where he might be. If we were to look, we can see Białystok, which is in Poland, and what looks like Warsaw too, although it is spelled differently. This blew my mind because it's very rare for Pokemon to reference real world locations. It's only happened a few times, with the time in Gen 1 where a scientist mentions he got sent to the Tixi branch, which is in Russia, or another scientist who mentioned that Mew was first seen in a forest in Guyana. But this raises so many questions for me now. Was Surge actually in Poland? Was he fighting in Poland? If so, when? So many questions and not enough answers. Buried Fossil. This card really just hits a sad note. Buried Fossil from Skyridge is definitely one of the nicest looking fossil cards we've ever seen, make no mistake about it. But when you actually deep dive the artwork and what's going on here, it can actually take a bit of a dark turn. So we all know how the fossil mechanic works in the games, right? You find a fossil either in the desert, a cave or underground for example, and then you take it to the relevant NPC, and they revive said fossil into a fully living and breathing Pokemon that are often extinct. Apart from the environmental impacts this could cause, this is actually a pretty cool process. Except in the game you can only really ever find 1 or 2 fossils to revive. This can skew our idea of how many fossils there actually are out there in the wild. This is where we take another look back at Buried Fossil. Here clearly we can see that 3, maybe more fossils are just chilling out here on the seabed at the bottom of the ocean. This is all well and good, until we realise that all those fossils have the chance to become, for all intents and purposes, back to life and become a new Pokemon with a new trainer, either battling or travelling the world. Except these are all buried on the seafloor and are most likely never to be seen again. Just makes me wonder, how many fossil Pokemon are actually out there in the Pokemon universe that are just waiting to be revived, but are in places that will never be found, like on the seabed or the bottom of a desert? Interesting. Stuck there for eternity. Octillery. This next one is fully wild. I want us to look at this stunning Octillery Trainer Gallery card. This card did see a ton of play thanks to its Rapid Strike Search ability. This would let you grab any Rapid Strike card from your deck once per turn. Not just a Pokemon like Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX, but supporters like Karina's Focus, or even energy cards like Rapid Strike Energy or Spiral Energy 2. This meant Octillery saw a ton of metagame success, all while people had no clue what was really going on in this card's artwork. So let's begin. I need you to focus on this person here in the background, clearly fishing for something, fair enough. They might have even had a net there too, and clearly they're having a fun time, right? I mean, look at their face. But that smile might not be on there for long, because when we look at this next card, this story could take a bit of a turn. I want you to now look at this Basculin card. We all know that Basculin is a fierce Pokemon. Just look at the Pokedex entry. When a school of Basculin appear in the lake, everything disappears, except for Corphish and Crawdon. That just shows how crazy Basculin are. This means a lot of powerful Pokemon get pushed out of lakes due to Basculin, like Gyarados for example. And if we were to look at this artwork closely, we can see something that links this Basculin to that previous Octillery card. First thing, let's look at those beams to the right. This could definitely be the same beams holding up that pier. Cool, but that's not the main thing. What I really want you to look at is what those Basculin have in their mouth. Yep, that is the same hat that the fisher was wearing. Meaning that at the very least, the fisherman's hat has fell into the lake and it's been instantly devoured. And if the whole fisherman actually fell in, well, I really hope that Octillery jumped in to help out. Dark Hypno. Now we have already seen the monstrosity that is Hypno in action so far in this iceberg. And I know you're wondering, how could it get worse? Well, I invite you to look at Dark Hypno. Take everything we said about the Hypno before, how it's seemingly preying on sleeping people that have no defense, and seemingly enjoying it as well, and turn the dial up to 11. Because apparently Hypno can have a dark personality, as if Hypno can get even worse. And let's take a look at the background here for a sec. We have dependent looping from Hypno, we have Hypno with that menacing look, and we have that very scary background. And this makes me wonder, Is this Dark Hypno currently working its magic on us? Are we seeing a point of view of what it would be like to be under a Hypno spell with this strange geometric background? All while Hypno, I don't know, eats your dreams or something? If that's the case, this is something that we don't ever want to see again. Thanks for watching this video. I want to give a massive shout out to Pokédex for supplying some of the cards for this video. If you want a fully built deck sent to your house as early as the next working day, you got to check out Pokédex. And make sure to use my discount code if you are to get yourself a little bit of money off, and it also supports me as well. And why don't you check out this video here, where we look at the greatest upset in Pokemon TCG history.